Mom and Dad left this house to me. You don't live here anymore. Marcus dropped my second suitcase beside the first and stepped back toward the front door like he was putting garbage at the curb. I stared at him. You changed the locks. My 5-year-old daughter, Sophie, tightened both hands around mine. 3 days earlier, she had stood beside me at my parents' funeral. Now she was watching her uncle throw us out of the only home that had felt stable during the worst months of our lives. Marcus, we haven't even had the will reading. He shrugged. Dad already told me what he decided. Sophie looked up at me. Mommy, why is Uncle Marcus making us leave Grandma's house? Marcus glanced away. I didn't. I had moved into that house because Mom needed me after Dad became seriously ill. I cooked, handled appointments, stayed awake through bad nights, and raised Sophie under the same roof. Marcus visited when it suited him. Now both our parents were gone, and suddenly he was acting like their deaths had promoted him to landlord. You know why I was living here, I said. Oh, please, Marcus folded his arms. You lived here for free, Kelly. Maybe if you'd prepared for your own life instead of depending on Mom and Dad, you wouldn't be in this position. Something about that sentence bothered me more than the insult. He sounded too certain. How do you know Dad left you the house? Marcus smiled, because he discussed it with me privately. And the rest of the estate. His smile widened. You'll find out. I looked at Sophie and stopped myself from arguing. Whatever Marcus had done, or believed he had done, I wasn't going to turn my parents' porch into a battlefield in front of my daughter. I picked up our suitcases. Marcus watched us walk toward my car without offering to help. That evening, I checked Sophie and myself into a modest hotel. I didn't tell Marcus anything about my finances. As far as he was concerned, that hotel room confirmed exactly what he had believed about me for years. I was the struggling younger sister. The one whose little property business had apparently gone nowhere. 2 days later, my phone rang. Ms. Bennett, a man said. This is Daniel Reeves, your parents' estate attorney. The formal reading has been scheduled for tomorrow. An hour before the meeting, Marcus sent me a text. Bring tissues. You're not going to like what Dad decided. The next morning, I walked into Daniel Reeves's office determined to learn whether my brother had pressured our parents while they were vulnerable. Marcus was already seated at the conference table. He looked at me and smiled. And one question wouldn't leave my mind. If the will hadn't even been read yet, how was Marcus so certain I was getting nothing? I had barely stepped away from the conference room when Marcus followed me into the hallway. Where's Sophie? With a babysitter. He raised an eyebrow. You can afford one. I turned toward him. Marcus leaned against the wall, adjusting the cuff of his expensive shirt like we were discussing something trivial instead of our parents' estate. I'm not bringing my 5-year-old into a room where adults are fighting over her grandparents' possessions, I said. Probably smart. His mouth curled into a smirk, although I'm more curious about how long you can afford that hotel. There it was again. The same assumption Marcus had carried about me for years. He had the executive title, expensive car, tailored suits, and the habit of mentioning prices whenever he bought something. Marcus wanted people to know when he was doing well. I had built my company differently. Years earlier, whenever I mentioned a new property management contract or expansion, Marcus would laugh. How's that little property thing going? Eventually, I stopped telling him. Now he apparently believed silence meant failure. I stepped closer. Did you convince Dad to change the will? His smirk disappeared. Excuse me. You heard me. You knew I was living there. You knew why. Yet somehow, 3 days after the funeral, you already knew enough to change the locks. Marcus straightened. I didn't convince Dad of anything. He told me months ago that I was getting the house. Months ago. And the car, some investments, personal property, he shrugged. Dad knew who could actually handle serious assets. I studied his face. Something suddenly didn't fit. You saw the will. Marcus hesitated. Only for a second, but I caught it. Dad told me what was in it. That isn't what I asked. Before he could answer, the conference room door opened. Daniel Reeves entered carrying 2 thick folders. Under his arm was a third item, a sealed document envelope. Marcus's attention snapped toward it. What's that? Daniel placed everything carefully on the table. Supplemental instructions from your parents. They specifically directed that these be addressed last. For the first time since Marcus had thrown Sophie and me out, I watched uncertainty cross his face. Then I noticed something beneath Daniel's hand. A company name was faintly visible on one of the documents. I leaned forward. My pulse changed. Marcus clearly didn't recognize it. But I did. Before Daniel could sit down, Marcus suddenly reached across the table toward the sealed document. That shouldn't be part of this. Daniel moved the sealed document out of Marcus's reach. Mr. Bennett, he said calmly, every document your parents executed will be handled according to their instructions. Marcus slowly withdrew his hand. I'm just saying Dad already explained what he wanted. Then there shouldn't be a problem hearing it formally. 2 estate representatives sat across from us as Daniel opened the first folder. The reading began. And for the next several minutes, everything seemed to prove Marcus right. The Bennett residence passes to Marcus Bennett. Marcus leaned back. Dad's vintage car went to him next. Then personal belongings, specifically designated in the will and several conventional investment accounts. With every item, Marcus looked more comfortable. Then Daniel turned to me. Kelly Bennett is to receive her mother's jewelry box, the designated family photographs, personal letters from both parents, and the items separately identified for Sophie Bennett. I swallowed at the mention of Sophie. Marcus smiled. Not because he wanted those things. Because compared with a house and investment accounts, he thought I had lost. Daniel continued reading, but Marcus interrupted. So that's it. Daniel looked up. For this portion. Marcus turned toward me. Hope you enjoy being homeless, because I made sure you get nothing. The room went silent. One of the estate representatives lowered her pen. Daniel's expression hardened. Mr. Bennett, you did not determine these distributions. Your parents did. I stared directly at Marcus. What do you mean you made sure? His jaw tightened. Then arrogance won. I told Dad the truth. For months, I told him you couldn't handle serious assets. Giving you the house would have been irresponsible. My fingers tightened around the edge of my chair. So Marcus really had been talking to Dad about cutting me out. He just hadn't realized what Dad had and hadn't told him. Daniel closed the first folder. There appears to be a misunderstanding. Marcus gave a short laugh. About what? The assets we've just discussed represent property held directly within your parents' ordinary estate. Marcus frowned. What else could there possibly be? Daniel reached for the sealed folder. The same folder Marcus had tried to grab. The same one carrying a company name I recognized. He placed it in the center of the table and broke the seal. Marcus stopped smiling. I leaned forward. Daniel unfolded the first document, looked between us, and said, There's one final section. Marcus's chair scraped against the floor. Final section, he snapped. Dad already gave me the important assets. Daniel didn't react. That assumption is exactly why we need to finish. Marcus opened his mouth again, but Daniel continued. This section concerns ownership interests that were intentionally held separately from the household estate. He turned the first page. Several years ago, your parents sold 2 investment properties. A portion of those proceeds was subsequently invested in a privately held company. Marcus frowned. What company? I already knew. The faint name I had seen beneath Daniel's hand earlier was now printed clearly across the document. Bennett Kelly Holdings. My company. I stared at the page as memories suddenly connected. Dad asking me for updated valuation reports. Mom wanting to know about our warehouse expansion. The two of them asking questions about contracts and acquisitions that I had assumed were simply their way of taking an interest in what I had built. And one evening, Mom had squeezed my hand while Sophie played nearby and said, "That little girl's future is more secure than you realize." At the time, I thought she was encouraging me. Now I understood. Daniel continued, "Your parents purchased a minority ownership interest in Bennett Kelly Holdings and retained that position." Marcus looked at me, then back at Daniel. "And their final instructions transfer their entire remaining interest to Kelly." Marcus blinked. Then he actually laughed. "That's the big surprise." Daniel remained silent. Marcus looked at me with the same expression he'd worn whenever he called my work that little property thing. "A minority share in Kelly's small company. Fine, she can have it." Daniel turned toward me. "Ms. Bennett, the estate documents contain current valuation information regarding the company and associated holdings. Do I have your permission to disclose those figures?" I held Marcus's stare. "Yes." Daniel opened the financial statement. Marcus leaned forward. His smile lasted another few seconds. Then he noticed the pages underneath. Subsidiary companies, commercial properties, warehouse interests, regional logistics facilities. His eyes began moving faster down the figures. He looked at me, back at the page, then at Daniel. "Wait." His face changed. "Kelly owns." "Mr. Bennett," Daniel interrupted, turning to the final valuation page. "Please let me finish." Daniel rested both hands on the financial statement. Bennett Kelly Holdings was founded by Kelly Bennett 9 years ago. Marcus slowly turned toward me. Daniel continued. "The company began with a single commercial property management contract. Over time, it expanded into warehouse management, commercial real estate interests, and regional logistics facilities." Marcus stared at me. "You told us you managed properties." "I do." His eyebrows pulled together. "You never said you owned all this." I kept my voice level. "You never asked. You laughed whenever I talked about the company." Daniel turned another page. "For years, I had reinvested most of what I earned. I didn't buy the luxury car Marcus expected successful people to drive. I didn't move into some enormous house just so relatives could see what I had." Marcus had mistaken a quiet life for an unsuccessful one. "Our parents didn't build Kelly's company for her," Daniel explained. "They became minority investors after selling 2 investment properties. Their investment purchased a legitimate ownership interest in an established business Kelly had already created. So they gave her their money." "No," Daniel said firmly. "They invested it." He pointed to the supporting documents. "And Kelly retained controlling ownership throughout." Marcus's eyes dropped toward the papers. Daniel explained that as Bennett Kelly Holdings expanded, the value of our parents' minority position had increased with it. Under their supplemental instructions, every remaining share they owned now transferred to me. Marcus swallowed. "But I still got the house." "Yes," Daniel said. "You inherited the residence and the other assets already identified." A little confidence returned to Marcus's face. Then Daniel added, "Those were not your parents' most valuable financial interests." The room went completely still. Daniel turned to the valuation page. "Taking into account Ms. Bennett's existing controlling ownership, her commercial property interests, investments, logistics holdings, and the additional shares transferred under this provision, the documents place her current net worth at approximately." He paused to verify the figure. $18,700,000. Marcus didn't move. "What?" "Approximately $18.7 million. "No." Daniel slid the valuation toward him. Marcus stared at the number, then at me. 18.7 million. Yes. He looked genuinely unable to reconcile the woman sitting across from him with the sister he had thrown onto the porch 5 days earlier. You told us you managed properties, he whispered again. I held his gaze. I do. Daniel added. Ms. Bennett's company both manages and owns interests across multiple commercial properties and logistics sites. Marcus pushed his chair backward. He tried to stand. Then his face drained of color. Marcus. His hand grabbed the edge of the conference table. The chair tipped backward, and Marcus collapsed. Daniel immediately stood while one of the estate representatives called for assistance. Within moments, Marcus was conscious again. Staff checked him, and thankfully, he was physically fine. Humiliated, but fine. When he finally returned to his chair, he wouldn't look at me. Then came the anger. I'm challenging this. Daniel remained composed. You are entitled to seek independent legal advice. But these documents were properly executed and supported by independent legal and financial records. Marcus pointed toward me. She manipulated them. That argument would not change the origin of the company, Daniel replied. Kelly founded and controlled Bennett Kelly Holdings years before your parents became investors. Marcus had spent months convincing Dad that I couldn't handle serious assets. Meanwhile, I had been managing assets worth more than anything Marcus imagined inheriting. And despite everything, I didn't try to take the house from him. Marcus kept exactly what our parents left him. That turned out to be consequence enough. The house came with property taxes, insurance, maintenance, and expenses Marcus hadn't bothered calculating while he was celebrating becoming its owner. Months later, he called me. I've been thinking, he said, maybe you should buy the house. For what? He named a price, well above its reasonable value. I almost laughed. Instead, I said, no, Marcus. You can afford it. That doesn't mean I want it. Silence. You wanted the house, I reminded him. It's yours. I ended the call. By then, Sophie and I had our own home, a comfortable place near her school, chosen because it worked for our life, not because I needed to prove my net worth to anyone. I kept Mom's jewelry box. I kept Dad's letters. I kept the photographs. Those mattered to me in a way Marcus never understood. The shares I inherited were incorporated into my long-term estate, planning with protections for Sophie's future. I continued running Bennett Kelly Holdings exactly as I had before. My relationship with Marcus never recovered. I didn't destroy him. I didn't take his inheritance. I simply stopped giving him access to my money, my business relationships, and my decisions. And Sophie never again had to stand beside a suitcase while someone threatened her mother with homelessness. Marcus inherited the house he used to throw me out, but I walked away with the future my parents had quietly trusted me to build.